Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how to make a round granny in a square. You can find the written instructions for this on my website www.mezzacrafts.com. This is actually a great project for using up scrap yarn. Here I've got some 4-ply sock yarn and a 3mm hook, but you can use any thickness of yarn with a corresponding hook size, but bear in mind you will get a larger motif. So I'm going to start off with a slip knot loop on my hook, just as you would normally start, and then I'm going to chain 4. I'm going to join to form a ring in the first chain. Join with a slip stitch. And I'm going to chain 3, which will count as a double crochet. Then I'm going to make 2 double crochet into the ring. Chain 2 to make a corner. 3 double crochet into the ring, chain 2 for another corner, another 3 double crochet, chain 2, another 3, I'm going to chain 2 and I'm going to find the third chain of my beginning chain 3 and join with a slip stitch. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3 and make sure you go through both loops of the chain for a nice neat finish. I'm going to find my scissors and just trim that off. So you can do this all in one colour if you like, but as I mentioned, this is quite a good way of using up little bits of yarn. So round 1, and you should have what looks like the start of a traditional granny square. 3 double crochet on each side, 4 sides, and then a chain 2 for each corner space. Now I'm ready for round 2, and I'm going to join a new colour, and I would recommend not starting in the same space where you've just finished, because if you keep starting and finishing in the same corner, your eye kind of gets drawn to that because it does look slightly different. So I tend to just move one along each time. So you can join the yarn to this corner however you like. The way I do it is I just hold a short tail at the back, go into the stitch or space where I want to join, grab the yarn, pull up a loop, and then make however many chains I need to, in this case 3. So this doesn't seem initially particularly secure, but I tend to pull it then to one side, to the left, and then continue making the stitches I need, and as I do that I'm trapping it in, and then when I come to sew things in at the end, I make sure I secure it by sewing it back the other way. I find this less bulky than other methods of joining, which can sometimes leave an unsightly knot there. So we're going to do chain 3, and then we're going to make 2 double crochets into the same space. Then we're going to chain 1 and then we're going to make a full corner in this corner, so we're going to do 3 double crochet, chain 1, 3 double crochet, chain 1, and another 3 double crochet, chain 1, another 3 double crochet in that same corner, chain 1, and you've guessed it, in the next corner I'm going to do 2 lots of 3 double crochet, separated by a chain 1. And I'm just actually, if you just saw that, this join from the previous round kind of naturally wants to go over to the right where we joined with a slip stitch. I'm going to allow it to do that, and then as I crochet into my corner I'm catching that tail in, and it saves 1 step of weaving in your ends. I still have to sew it the other way, but gets it out of the way as well. So chain 1 and another 3 double crochet, chain 1, and now this first corner I need to finish that off because I only did half the corner, so I need to do 3 double crochet, chain 1, and again find my 3rd chain. And sometimes that can be difficult to spot, so you can do you can work out in the reverse way where the 3rd chain is by working out which is your first proper stitch. So the first proper stitch is there, that's the top of the first proper stitch, therefore my chain 3 must be this one. It's quite easy for those to become deformed, and then they're not so easy to spot. So I'm going to trim that, cut that end. And then just yarn over and pull through to fasten off. And there you've got round 2. For all intents and purposes, at the moment it looks like more or less traditional granny square. Now we're ready to do round 3. I'm going to use this green yarn, hopefully I've got enough, it's a very small amount. And as with the previous round, we are going to start by joining the yarn into the next space from the last spot where we fastened off. So I'm going to go into this side edge chain 1 space. Okay, I'm just going to join the yarn here. And I'm going to 2 double crochet into the same space, then I'm going to chain 1, then I'm going to make another 3 double crochet into the same space, then I'm going to chain 1, then I'm going to 3 double crochet into the next chain 1 space. And now I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to 3 double crochet into the next chain 1 space, which is one of the sides of what was a little square. I'm going to chain 1, I'm going to 3 double crochet back into that same space. So what you might notice we're doing is we're shifting where the where we're doing the increases, which when you're making a square you always increase in the same corner every time, and that's what keeps it nice and square. But because we're trying to make a circle, we're just shifting where we put the increases to change the shape of the motif. So you can guess into the next chain one space, which would have been a corner if it was a square. We're just going to put, oh, I forgot to do a chain one after my 3 double crochet. I'm going to put 3 double crochet into there, and we're going to chain one, and then we're going to put 3 double crochet, chain one, 3 double crochet into the next space, chain one, 3 double crochet into the next space. Don't like where that knot's fallen, but it's just a demonstration. Actually, I had to tie a load of tail ends together in the hope that I would have enough of this yarn, so that's why there's knots there. I'm not very happy with that, but I might get away with it. Chain one to the next space. I'm going to 3 double crochet, chain one, 3 double crochet, chain one. We've got our last space here, and again I'm just going to allow that tail end to fall over to the right, so that when I go into that space and make my final set of 3 double crochet, I'm actually catching a bit of that tail in there. Chain one, and now join with a slip stitch into the 3rd chain of your beginning chain 3. I like to go through the first loop first and then back loop second. It's quite tricky trying to do it all in one go. Fasten with a slip stitch, cut the yarn, pull it through. Yes, and I do use quite short tails, which I can show you how to sew in as well. I don't like to waste yarn, so I go for very short tails. So at the end of round 3, your square should be starting to look a little bit rounder. Now we're ready for round 4, and you've guessed it, we're going to join the yarn into the next chain one space after this join of the previous round. And then we're going to chain 3, then we're going to make 2 double crochet in the same space, and then we're going to put 3 double crochets into the next. Oh, I forgot to chain one again. I'm going to chain one, and then 3 double crochet into the next chain one space. So this is now where it gets a little bit different. So far we've only been crocheting into the chain spaces, but now we're actually going to crochet into the middle stitch of each of the single sets of clusters. So if you have a look at what you've made so far, you have still in essence got 1, 2, 3, 4 corners with these double sets of clusters in them, and in between each of those you've got a single set of 3 double crochets. So for this round we are only going to do single sets of 3 double crochets, so we're not going to ever put 2 into any space or any stitch. We're going to go into every single space, but additionally we're also going to go into the middle of each of these 4 sets of single clusters. So I've remembered I've done a 3 double crochet and a chain one in that space, and now I'm coming to this single cluster. I'm going to go into the middle, which is the second stitch. I'm going to put 3 in there, chain 1, 3 double crochet into the next chain 1 space, chain 1, 3 double crochet into the next, in between this cluster, 2 sets of clusters rather, set of 2 clusters, and then chain 1 into the next space with 3, chain 1, and now we've come to another single set, so we're going to go into the second 1, 2 and make 3, 2, 3, chain 1, 2 into the next space, 3 into the next space, sorry, chain 1, 3 into the next space, chain 1, 3 into the next space, and then chain 1, and then we've got this single set here. We're going to go into the second stitch. Chain 1, 3 into the next space, chain 1, 3 into the corner, chain 1, 3 into the next, chain 1, and into this last single set, and again I'm just going to allow that tail end from the finish to fall across there, so that as I crochet into that stitch, oops, I'm going to catch in. That's 3 in there, chain 1, and then 3 in the last. One, chain 1, and join with a slip stitch into the third chain of your beginning chain 3. And this is what it should look like after round 4. Now we're ready for round 5. And with this round you can just join anywhere you like, really, in between any space. Chain 1 space. This is a nice easy round. I'm going to chain 3 to start with, 2 double crochet in the same space, I'm going to chain 1 and then 3 double crochet into the next chain 1 space, and that's what you're going to do all the way around. You're just going to chain 1 and 3 double crochet into the next chain 1 space. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you when I've finished. So I've come to the end of the round, and I've remembered to do my chain 1 after the 3 double crochet. I'm going to join with a slip stitch into the third chain of my beginning chain 3, and then I am going to cut the yarn pull through the loop. So at this point you might find that your motif is sort of curling up a bit like this. That's absolutely fine. You don't need to worry about that because the subsequent rows are going to flatten it out. So now we're coming up to the last 2 rounds, which are going to be used to square off the motif. So where you join this final colour is actually quite important because you're starting at a corner. So where we need to start, if you look at your central motif, which makes a kind of a cross shape, you need to follow the points of one of the crosses up and attach the yarn into the corresponding central stitch. So I'll show you again. So we've got our central cross here and I need to join it into the nearest corresponding cluster going directly north from the point. So it's this cluster here and it is going to the middle, so into the second double crochet of this cluster. So for this round we're actually only going to be working into the back loops. So here's a tip: when you're working in the back loops only and you need to join to make that stitch slightly more stable, if you tip the back of the work towards you, you'll be able to see what I call, they look a bit like a purl bump in knitting. It's like a little horizontal bump at the back of the work, just below. That's the back loop you can see there. Just below that back loop there is this little lump. So when you're working in the back loop and you need to attach the yarn or do any stitches such as increasing that are going to put additional strain onto that single loop, you can pick up that back loop to give extra stability and it stops it deforming the stitch. So I found the correct spot to join. I'm going into the middle stitch of the cluster, only going into the back loop. I'm going to catch the back ridge, secure that as I join it. So I'm going to join same as usual. For a single crochet, I'm just going to join the yarn, chain 1 and single crochet in exactly the same spot. We need to do some increasing on this round. To start with, we're just going to make 3 single crochets, 1 into each of the next 3 stitches, 2, 3. I've just caught the tail end in there as I go, but you don't need to worry about that if you don't want to. And now I'm going to make an increase. So remember, I'm going to go through the back loop, but I'm also going to catch that back ridge for this particular increase because it just gives a bit of stability. So 1 stitch, 2 stitches in the same stitch is an increase. Now I'm going to continue to evenly increase around, but I'm going to increase on every 8th stitch. So I'm going to make 7 single crochets into the back loops, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and on the 8th I'm going to make an increase. So I'm going to catch the back loop. You don't have to do that, but yeah, I find it is quite helpful. So I'm going to put 2 stitches into the 8th stitch and then another 7, and increase into the 8th. So I'm going to carry on like that all around. 7 single crochets into the back loops, 1 into each of the back loops, and then 2 single crochets into the 8th back loop. So I'm going to carry on around and as I start getting closer to the end of the round, I'll join you again. So I've just made the final increase, and I should be left with 3 stitches, 3 single crochets to make. There's another big join where I was trying to make sure I had enough yarn by joining up lots of little scraps. And now you're going to join the end of the round with a slip stitch into the first single crochet, and you're going to carry on the next round with this same coloured yarn. So now we're ready to do round 7, where we're actually going to square off this circle. So we're going to start off with a chain 4, which counts as 1 treble crochet. Then we're going to make a treble crochet, which is 2 yarn overs. I'm going to go into this exact same spot where we joined with the slip stitch. I'm going to pull up a loop, and you should have 4 loops on your hook. Yarn over, draw off 2, yarn over, draw off 2, yarn over, draw off 2, and that is a treble. And then we're going to chain 2 for our corner space, and then we're going to make 2 more trebles in that exact same spot. And as you've noticed, we've gone back to working through both loops now, both loops of the stitch. So into the next stitch we are going to put another 2 treble crochets. And then we're going to put 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. Then we're going to do a half double into the next stitch. And then we're going to make 2 extended single crochets, 1 into each of the next 2 stitches. So I'll just go over what an extended single crochet is, just in case you have never made one before. So you go into the next stitch, you grab the yarn and you pull it up. So normally with the single crochet you would now yarn over and pull that through. With an extended single crochet there's an additional step. You actually yarn over and you only pull the yarn over through the first loop. So in essence you're kind of making one little chain there. Then you yarn over and you draw off 2. We've got to do another one, so I'll show you again. Go into the stitch, pull up a loop, now you've got 2. You're going to yarn over, but you're only going to draw off the first loop. Then you're going to yarn over again and draw off both loops on the hook, and that's called an extended single crochet. And that is slightly taller than a normal single crochet, but not as tall as a half double. And it's actually quite adjustable, because I'll show you with this next one. So you go into the next stitch to make the extended single crochet, you pull up a loop, yarn over and you draw through the first loop to make your chain. So if you actually then pull the working yarn a little bit tighter to make that chain a bit shorter, you can then make that stitch slightly shorter. So if you really wanted to taper it, you could do your half double, a normal extended single crochet, and then an extended single crochet where you are deliberately shortening that little chain you do in the middle. But actually you don't need to worry too much about that. It will be fine if you don't do that, but it's just a subtle way you can use that extended single crochet. Maybe you might find that tip useful in other projects. So the next step now is we're going to make 5 single crochets, 1 into each of the next 5 stitches. And now we're going to do 2 extended single crochets again, one into each of the next 2 stitches. Then we're going to do a half double, and we're going to do 2 double crochets, one into each of the next 2 stitches, and then 2 trebles into the next stitch, and then the next set of stitches is going to be the corner. So that, if you've lined up your initial round 6 join in the correct space, then the corners, the stitch you do the corners in, should always line up with the direction of this, the first round, the central cluster. And here we can see that our corner is going to fall in the middle of this set here, so we know we're on target. So that's a good thing to keep your eye on as you go around, to make sure that you're keeping into the right sequence. So the next step is a corner, which is 2 trebles, a chain 2, and another 2 trebles in exactly the same spot. And now we're going to continue in the same way all the way around. So I'm going to put 2 treble crochets into the next stitch, then I'm going to do 1 double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches, then I'm going to do a half double, then I'm going to do 1 long single crochet into the next 2 stitches into each of the next 2, then I'm going to do 5 single crochets, 1 into each of the next 5 stitches, and then you can guess, 1 extended single crochet into each of the next 2 stitches, a half double crochet into the next stitch, 1 double crochet into the next 2 stitches, and then 2 trebles into the next stitch, and then back to another corner, which, if we've done everything right, should land here in this one. Yeah, and that will be 2 trebles, chain 2 and 2 trebles. So I'm just going to carry around like that, and then I'll meet you as I get to the end to finish off this sort of partial side of this corner here. So I'm just coming up to the end of the round, doing the last 2 trebles. Now I'm going to actually finish the round with a sewn bind off, just to make it look really neat. So we need to cut the yarn, making sure we leave a long enough tail for threading and sewing, and then I'm going to pull the live loop of the hook until the tail end pops out, and then we're going to thread that tail end. We're going to do a sewn bind off. So if you haven't done this before, what we're actually going to do is join by making kind of a mock crochet stitch, but with a needle and thread. And the beauty of this is, because you're making a stitch, you're making an extra stitch, so to speak, you need to skip a stitch, which means you have to skip this horrible chain, you know, find the 4th chain of your beginning chain 4 and join with a slip stitch. We don't have any of that. It's nice and easy. You find because you've got to skip that stitch, or the mock stitch, you just go into the very first proper stitch, which is your first treble that you did here. You go through it just in the same direction that you would with your crochet hook, so through both loops, front and back. And if you have a look here, we're trying to get this sewn stitch similar size to the crochet stitches, but don't worry too much because you can adjust that later, so just roughly try and get it the right size. Then what I like to do is actually turn the work to the back and just flip it forward to you slightly, and then where this thread is coming out from the stitch, you want to go back down exactly that same spot. At the same time, get your needle, catch this, go through this little back ridge there, helps add a bit of stability. So now if you go, turn it back round to the front and have a look, you can see that we've created a mock stitch, so there's no horrible knot or anything. The only problem is, because these stitches are quite long, this area is not very stable, it's quite open. So what I like to do in this case is use this tail end of thread just to secure that area. So it's actually the chain, the beginning chain from the previous round and the last stitch, from the beginning of the round, sorry, and the last stitch you've just made. So I like to almost make like a little whip stitch. You only need about 3 stitches in a treble. So going through the back of that that chain and the back of that treble, just catching in the loop. You don't have to be too perfect about it. All you've got to make sure is that you haven't accidentally pulled your mock stitch too tight so that it's not matching. And then again, I'm going to go back through the chain, back through the back of that treble, only catching like one tiny part of the stitch, like just a little loop at the back, through that chain, through that treble. So you can't see at all from the front that you've sewn through those stitches, but it does close up that gap and add a bit of stability. And then finally, I'm actually going to go into that single crochet row just because it's nice and secure in there. And again, don't pull it too tight because you want to match the gauge of your crochet. If you pull it too tight, it will pucker. It'll be really obvious. And then actually I'm going to go through some of this congested area here where the clusters were. And that is enough to secure that end. So, should look something like this. Don't worry if it's not too even, because once you've blocked it, it'll look like this.